Hey everybody, how you doing? It's me again, Truth Teacher, coming at you with another video. So I'm following up on the live stream that I did last week. The topic that we were talking about was regarding the situation of that lady who had been attacked in Harlem. And the question that I was raising was, is it fair to blame all black men for what happened to her? Because in the subsequent days following the report, I saw a lot of videos on YouTube by unfortunately a lot of black women who were saying that, black men don't defend their women and that black men are the only group of men who don't protect their women. And basically, my position was that it was unfair to make that, those claims and those statements, because the fact of the matter is that this kind of thing, it's not a black thing, it's not a black issue. This is a human issue. And if we look, we'll find instances in many different societies around the world and even here in the United States where women are subjected to acts of violence by the men of their own communities. For example, that same week when that woman was attacked in Harlem, Puerto Rico declared a state of emergency because they have a crisis of femicide in the island. Since the hurricane, the devastation in Puerto Rico with Hurricane Maria, and then with this whole COVID situation, there's been a massive uptick in homicides against women. The overwhelming majority of them being domestic violence issues. We could also look to other societies in the region. For example, we could look at Honduras, and we'll see that there is one of the reasons why so many people are fleeing Honduras is because of violence against women. It's an epidemic of women being murdered in that country. We could also look at Colombia, where there's a serious problem when it comes to sex trafficking of young girls being targeted by pimps who sell them into, the sex work industry. Colombia is one of the major hubs in the Western Hemisphere for sex work. We could also look at Brazil, where there's the same problem of women being attacked, beaten, murdered. And quite often, even if it does get to court, it's dismissed because it's declared a crime of passion. We could look in the history of the United States as well and see that going back to the Depression, there was, it was rampant. Within the quote unquote white community, women being abused, women being battered, women being having their families abandoned, men suffering, not even all the time suffering from alcoholism, but certainly alcoholism played a big role of domestic violence against women. Oftentimes men just up and abandoning their families. You know, I've spoken about this before. I do have a branch of my family that is white, or I guess the more accurate description would be they passed for white. We've been reconnected by DNA. And, I was speaking with my cousin, who, if you look at her, you would not know that she's of African descent at all. She's as Anglo looking as can be. She was telling me of things that she experienced in her community growing up, like, friends of the family, where there was one friend of the family, a relative that was so stricken with alcoholism that they had to lock him in the attic. They had to keep him locked up. He was verbally and physically abusive, not only to his wife, but to his daughters. That's only one instance. She also had another friend who was married. Well, her friend's husband was really emotionally disturbed, and he also was very violent towards his family. And the reason for that was because of the trauma that he had sustained as a young man. His father was had 8 children by his wife, and he decided one day to just abandon his family and abandon his wife to go run off with a younger woman somewhere. In the history of this country in the 1920s, there was this thing called the Prohibition, where alcohol was illegal. And the reason why the Prohibition came about was specifically because of the issue of domestic violence in the white community, you know, especially poor immigrant communities. It was so bad that people came about, especially from the churches, and they figured, the way to get around this was to make alcohol illegal because it was leading to the breakup of families, horrible abuse of women by their men, abandonment of the family. All of the things that we're blaming on black men were prevalent in those communities, and that's why prohibition came into being. Within the course of my own life, I have witnessed domestic abuse in the Puerto Rican community, in the Dominican community. The very first time I witnessed domestic violence was, I had to have been about either 13 or 14 years old. And there was a lady that was living in my building. She was living on the same floor as me. She was a Dominican lady, very nice lady, very intelligent, um, working to put herself, through school and to make a life for herself. And she was murdered by her boyfriend. She decided that she didn't want to be with him anymore, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And so he came to her apartment, and he rang the doorbell. And when she looked out the peephole to see who it was, he shot her through the eye. She died immediately. My next door neighbors, once again Dominican, I don't know how to describe to you the sound of glass breaking, dishes breaking, her screaming, hearing the thud against the wall as he threw her against the wall. I mean, it sounded like she was going to break through the wall at any minute. This is what I have experienced and I have witnessed. And now I'm not saying this to put down Dominicans or Puerto Ricans or anyone else. I'm simply trying to illustrate the fact that things of this nature are human problems. It's not something that you can pin on any one particular ethnic group or the other. And I keep saying this over and over and over again, and I'm going to say it over as many times as I need to in order for it to really get through to people's minds. We are all human. This nonsense that we have of putting people into racial categories and then making inferences on their character based on their race or their ethnicity or their nationality or whatever is nonsense. At the end of the day, we are all human for better or for worse. We are capable of doing great things, but we're also capable, every last single one of us, of committing great acts of evil. We carry within ourselves the capacity for greatness, for goodness, or for evil. It's a choice. It all depends on which side of our nature we feed the most attention and energy to. We all have the light inside of us, but we also have darkness. And once again, depending on which part of our nature we serve more, that will determine what our default setting is. Evil is a choice. We can choose to do evil and to cultivate that evil dark side within us, or we can work to enhance and to build the light within us. So, with that, I want to share a screen here. I want to show you the report that's come in.
An update on a heinous attack caught on camera in Harlem. Police have made an arrest in the case. Welcome back here. I'm Maurice Dubois.
And I'm Christine Johnson. A woman was brutally attacked by a group of men outside a liquor store after she says she declined an offer to pay for the bottle of wine.
Police say one of the suspects is in custody after they arrested him in another case. CBS 2's Lisa Rosner has the story.
The scars from January 18th sent shockwaves throughout Harlem and beyond after CBS 2 told the story of a 31-year-old woman chased, kicked, and aggressively bitten outside a liquor store on West 128th Street. Surveillance video we obtained showed it happened just after she had walked inside alone to buy a bottle of wine. And she says the man in red, who police say is 22-year-old Tyrone Cooper, offered to pay. She told us,
I politely declined and I said, no, thank you, but thank you. Could pay for it myself. And I got ready to walk out. Before I walk out, he basically said that he felt like I thought that I was better than them.
Cooper was taken into police custody Sunday for a separate incident. He appeared in Brooklyn criminal court Tuesday for allegedly choking and punching his girlfriend at this apartment building on 51st Street in East Flatbush. Sources say she told police Cooper misunderstood something she said. The judge ordered him be held on $3,000 bail. Sources tell us that Cooper is now being brought here to the 32nd precinct in Harlem for charges related to the liquor store attack. But complaints from Manhattan and Brooklyn show he's been arrested several times before for other assaults.
There needs to be some penalties, and he needs to be arrested and not back out on these streets. He needs to do some time.
In Brooklyn last May, it's at the Clark Street subway station that Cooper allegedly asked someone for money, punched them in the face, and pushed them to the ground. He also faces charges of gang assault, menacing, and harassment in connection to a slashing at the Church Street station last year. And he's accused of stealing MTA gate keys at the Park Avenue South station. Now that Cooper is in police custody, the victim of the Harlem Attack posted on Instagram, "I couldn't and still can't understand why so much rage." She pointed out that 2 other suspects in her attack have still not been caught and said, "I'm healing well and continuing to appreciate life as it is. 1 down, 2 to go." In Harlem, Lisa Rosner, CBS 2 News.
And as for the prior arrest, Cooper's lawyer said he had been complying with check-ins for supervised release and pleaded that he not be sent to Rikers because he has asthma. The judge denied that request, saying the defendant's behavior was disturbing.
It's really funny, isn't it, that the most antisocial, psychopathic people in the world, when they get caught, all of a sudden, they want to be coddled. But as you can see, this young man had a history of violent behavior. Now, I want you to watch a segment of this video, okay? Because it really hits at the heart of what I'm trying to convey here. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from this, okay? I'm gonna just share screen again.
That 64% of the women in your
62 of the women out of.
Okay, here we go.
So you said you found out that 64% of the women in your
62 of the women out of 100 were as violent, yeah.
How did you find that?
Well, we did 3 generational questionnaires together.
And what kind of abuse were they?
Mostly from the ones that actually were violent themselves, you could see were mostly from violent prone families. Because it is generational. That's what I was trying to say. Look, have a look at this. Because the idea was, and feminist ideology and also what they talked about was all these innocent, hapless women coming in with children with these brutal, violent men behind them. No, it's not like that. Any more than it is for men. I mean, there are men who are extraordinarily violent, coming from violent backgrounds. But there's plenty of men who, by accident, get involved with violent women and then end up suffering exactly the same way.
So were you finding more women that were violent towards their male partner or towards their children?
The figures for women being violent towards their children is much higher. And you can't just simply say, oh, well, it's because women are actually left alone with children far more than men. That's true. But the fact is, neither a man, and the majority of the very serious violence, the people do have personality disorders, one sort or another. You can't leave them alone with very vulnerable small children. They can't cope. It's cruel. And we, fortunately, because of the programs we ran, if I had a mother coming in who was dangerous to her children, I would then be able to put her in one of our houses where the older mothers would mother her and take care of her and her children. That's what was needed, not keep taking the children away where they keep getting replaced, because you're only doubling and trebling the problem. But nobody would listen.
So you're processing everything. I think there's a tendency in this debate between women's issues and men's issues to take whatever statistic is against a certain gender, and if you are that gender, you feel attacked. If you're the opposite gender, you're saying, see?
That's what I keep saying to both sides, is can we stop what you did to me and what I did to you? Because that's not what it's about. It never has been about, actually. It's actually what happened to you, how you grew up, what happened to you, what you're doing now, how you're trying to make relationships or failing to make relationships, whether you're a man or a woman. that isn't the issue. And we're wasting so much time on this war. Anytime you talk to impassioned men who have been burnt horribly by what's happened to them, you can say the same to a woman who's been horribly burnt what's happened to them. That isn't the answer. The time has come. And actually, I'm very glad we have a thing called WOW, which is Women of the World, every year. It's always done on Women's Day, International Women's Day, March the 8th. And it was so wonderful for me because sitting there talking to, and the room was absolutely packed. It was about as big as this, with women all against the walls and men. And I remember saying at the end, thinking, oh, how's this going to go? I just said, if men and women won't come together to work on this subject of domestic violence, then there really is no future. And all the women in the room, there's only one woman, but everybody else said, we agree. And they were all feminists. So I think, the hope I have, is that there is a new, much younger feminist, not carrying the burdens of the very early feminists, who now have a great deal of freedom to make the decisions they want to make. And I'm hoping that they will bring that to the table and work with men, because I've always said there is a great need, and there will always be a need for women's movement, because the fact is that women, when they're having children in their lives, are vulnerable, and we have to meet men's needs and what women need, and we will need to always make sure that the balance is equal. And for me, it wasn't that I left a movement that I passionately believed in, and it was a vision that I had, and I just feel it's been terribly betrayed.
In some ways, I've been interviewing MRAs since July and still have a long road to go. But it seems like every person I interview in the men's rights movement has a different take on the issues. Warren Farrell seems very balanced in his views on women's issues and men's issues, and wants to see a gender transition where we're letting men stay home and we're encouraging women to be a part of the workforce and run for president. And then you have some other men like Harry Crouch, who seems he's angry, and he'll admit it, and it comes off. At times I felt like I was being attacked just for being a woman in the room, as he talked about issues that men were coming in with and talking about.
But you see, one of the things I think was very difficult with the men is so many times you're talking to the walking wounded because they haven't healed themselves. And you have that also, when women have come from extremely burning backgrounds. And until they actually have dealt with what's happened to them and been able to make some peace within themselves, they do more harm than good. Because they're talking, is this women's thing, they always said, the personal is political. Well, actually, no, it isn't. In fact, my father and mother were dysfunctional. Doesn't make all men and women dysfunctional. And I feel that's my message to the men as well. The fact, at the end of the day, it was your choice. It was my choice, the marriages I made, they didn't work out. Whatever the reason is, I'm responsible for my choice, and the same for men. So I would want, and I tend to work with men who, to a certain extent, have reached a position where, like Warren, they can be able to mediate their personal needs and the needs to make a movement that is going to bring harmony, hopefully, eventually to all of us.
Yeah, I just had a epiphany with you saying that the feminists that are men hating are really hurting.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Absolutely. Walking wounded. And some of them were wounded from before they were born. And if we would only begin to take time to understand what actually happens to a child when they're exposed to this sort of thing. I think the one thing that when Cassey was standing in front of me, it wasn't the bruises that made me aware. There was that moment when she said, and no one will help me. And I remember being 17, my sister and my brother was 14. My mother had died of cancer. My father brought the body home, put it in the dining room on the table. And for 6 days, he wouldn't bury her. So she rotted. And every night, he'd ask us to come in and he'd pull the cover off her. Because there was an open coffin, and we'd see her. And I asked everybody, the doctor, our family doctor, Miss Williams, who brought us up in the holiday house to come and help us. They came, but none of them helped us. And that was why the refuge movement was born, because Cassey said, and no one will help me. And she was right, no one would. The doctor gave her tranquilizers to cope with the beating. The psychiatrist gave her even more pills, so she was addicted to pills. Everybody around her let it go on. And my life's work is that we do have to listen, we do have to hear, and we do have to recognize that it's too late often by the time you're talking to somebody who's in their 40s, 50s, 60s. It's this next generation of children who are now being born that we should be working with.
So do you think this is this a women's issues, she was battered and no one was helping her, or is it men's issues that they're being ignored and they're being called whiners and suck it up, or is it just a humanity lacking compassion?
It's a human issue, and there are no votes. One of the greatest fears for any man standing up in your Senate is that he will lose women's votes. And who does the voting? Women, particularly politically active women. It's the same in England. Yeah. And the idea that anybody, we have no members of parliament who stand up for men's rights in our country. I don't think you have any here, have you? No. Well, that says it all, doesn't it?
Men run Congress, we have a male president, and the highest.
But then the thing you also have to say is men have no history of helping each other in emotional issues. They don't. There's actually no history.
Well, aren't there feminists trying to feminize men to be more emotional and share their feelings?
No, most feminists don't want men in their lives. Actually, that's the trouble. This war that's been declared is actually been declared on men. And instead of putting out a hand and saying, hey, let's look at this together, it has been such a brutal war, and men have lost so much because of it, that at the moment, as far as I can see, this is going to go on until such time as I don't see what's going to actually, if nothing's done, the whole fabric of our social conditions in countries like ours are just falling apart.
So we need to listen to men's issues.
We need to listen to human issues, which is the family. The idea that the family should be destroyed, and has been very destroyed, means that you actually take away the most valuable two human beings who love each other, commit themselves to each other, and choose to have children or not have children. That's what we should be celebrating. And we don't. We tell men.
I think that she perfectly summed up the whole situation. Now, there's a lot more to this interview. It's 45 minutes long. I'm going to leave the link to the video down below so that you can see it in its entirety. But this speaks to the heart of why I decided to address this issue. Because for many years now, what I've been seeing, and yes, I am at this moment focusing on the African diaspora community, but it's by no means limited to just us. But the narrative that I'm trying to get in front of is this idea that we as people of the African diaspora are so damaged beyond hope, so toxic, like, we are the most toxic group of people on the face of the earth. Like this brainwashing that's been pushed in the media and certain academic and intellectual circles, I think is poison. And for this reason, I cannot for the life of me support any of this toxic back and forth that I see going on. I see men of the African diaspora, and once again, let's make something clear. This is not everyone, but there definitely is a very loud segment. It's very toxic, calling their women out of their names, slandering them, just painting this picture that the black woman is the worst thing on the face of the earth. And that, men need to save themselves. We need to go and find, go to other countries outside of the United States to find, suitable women, women who have traditional values, who know how to submit to their men, and all of this bullshit. But you go to Latin America, and what do you find? The same crisis is happening in those societies too. I haven't seen any reports, but I've heard whisperings that in the Dominican Republic, they're having issues there too when it comes to femicide. Um, and once again, I'm not picking on any group of people. I'm simply trying to bring attention to the fact that this is a human issue. It's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's not a Latino thing, it's a human thing. We are all human. We have the same capacity for learning. We have the same capacity for intelligence, but we also have the same capacity for complete savagery and ignorance. So don't be fooled in, having this romantic view of the world where you put one group of people on a pedestal over another, whether that be putting another group of people on a pedestal over your own, or putting your own group on a pedestal over everyone else. We are all human. None of us are any better than anyone else, not as a group. Individually, based on our own merits and the content of our own character, yes, we can see, certain people are more functional than others, but as a group as a whole, no, we're all a mess. We are all a mess. I have to fall back on my spirituality when I look at things like this, and I have come to the personal conclusion that planet Earth is the place where damaged souls come to try to find healing, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. I have traveled around the world and I have seen dysfunction everywhere I have gone. I've seen a lot of beautiful things, yes, but I have seen dysfunction in every area of the world, in every country that I have gone to. I have seen segments of that population that are struggling with mental and emotional illness. And the thing from this interview that really knocks the nail on the head is the fact of speaking to intergenerational trauma. When you look beyond the surface, you'll see that quite often, more often than not, there's been a history in a family of trauma going back multiple generations. And it gets passed down from one generation to the next, walking wounded. people emotionally traumatized. At the end of the day, you know, when we look at people who are maladjusted, we have to understand the fact that what we're looking at here are people who are dealing with trauma, emotional trauma, the best way they know how. Now, some people, for whatever reasons or for whatever circumstances, have been able to figure out ways to deal with that trauma, that pain, and that hurt in ways that are life affirming and constructive. And other people, they just don't have the skills, or they didn't have the resources or the right people around them to show them a better way. And so that pain, it has to come out, it has to express itself in one way or another. Some people may try to medicate by indulging in alcohol, by indulging in drugs, by indulging in certain risky behaviors. Some people lash out violently. Some people end up, I don't know, I guess it's like they're so caught in the drama mentally that they play it out, where they become the, you know, they take on the role of the victimizer, and they play that role out against other people because they never got the resources that they needed in time to break that circle, to break that cycle of abuse, to begin to heal that emotional and that psychological damage that they sustained. This young man, as you can see, he has a history of violent behavior. What the hell happened to him to make him that way? And by saying that, by no means, don't get the shit twisted now and think that I'm trying to make an excuse for destructive behavior. Absolutely not. But I'm saying that we need to understand what brings people to this point so that we can make sure that it does not get passed on to the next generation. So when I hear people talking about, oh, Black women this, Black women that, listen, I don't deny that those individuals have experienced something really painful, really difficult in their lives. And vice versa when it comes to, oh, Black men ain't shit. This, that, and the third. Okay, yes, you have experienced something really, really traumatic. I'm not taking that away from you. I'm not trying to negate that or downplay it at all. But what I'm saying is, don't perpetuate that cycle of destruction any further. By now, you're going to take this and make it, now you're going to make this about all Black men or all Black women. Now you're going to take that trauma and that pain and turn it inside towards ourselves and look to another group of people like they got their shit together much better than we do. When the fact of the matter is, when you really look up close, a lot of those people are struggling just like we are. They're dealing with the same dysfunction, the same traumas just like we are. Just because you may not see it being acted out in the same way that it is in our communities, because you don't a lot of times have the poverty that goes with it, don't think for a second, don't fool yourself in thinking that they don't have problems too. I know people who've made the mistake of thinking that marrying white was going to solve all their problems and they were going to live happily ever after with Prince Charming, only to find out that Prince Charming was an alcoholic, physically abusive. Prince Charming, you know, white Prince Charming ended up molesting the kids. And now let's not get the shit twisted once again. And you see, that's the way those white people are. No, we got to stop this bullshit. These racial ideas of putting one group of people, oh, all those white people, you see, that's what they're about. Oh, you see them black people. Oh, you see them Latino people, the Mexican. We need to stop that bullshit. We are all human, for better or for worse. We're all capable of doing great things. We're all capable of committing evil acts against each other. We're all human. And perhaps the first step in helping humanity as a whole to evolve to a higher level is to recognize that fact and to start putting our heads together and start figuring out, how do we address these issues? How do we head this off at the pass? Because people, in most cases, aren't just born like this, they're made. How do we recognize the patterns of dysfunction and abuse and then create ways of dealing with that trauma so that it doesn't get perpetuated and passed on anymore? Don't think that you're going to find, you're going to run away from life. This is a human problem. It's not a black problem or a white problem or anything. It's a human problem. Now, 9 times out of 10, it gets exasperated when you have situations where people are living in poverty because poverty induces stress. It's extremely stressful, especially when you've got a family, you got mouths to feed. It's extremely stressful, and a lot of people break under the stress, or they seek ways to alleviate the pain that end up creating more problems like alcoholism. Poverty is a breathing ground for emotional and mental disease. It most certainly is. And all we have to do is look at all the other immigrant groups in this country. Just take a really good look at our history and we'll see it. But we have a tendency to romanticize bullshit. The wild, wild west. Well, why the fuck you think they called it the Wild West? What do you think that was all about? Complete chaos. Complete barbarity, savagery. But the media comes along and they put a spin on it. They make it look glamorous. Gunslinger. They do the same thing within the community of the quote unquote black community. Ghetto fabulous. What the fuck is ghetto fabulous? They put this image out there in the media and they glorify dysfunctional behavior, making it look like it's something wonderful that needs to be emulated. Love and hip hop, basketball wives, all of this trash that they feed us. The way rap music has been completely taken over and turned into something, I can't defend it. I'm sorry, I can't. Because I was there when hip hop first started out, and it was about having a good time and having a party and just enjoying being young and enjoying life. And once it got taken over by the corporate machine, they completely turned it into something else to make to make our children think that beating the crap out of each other and shooting each other and selling drugs and pimping and hoeing is something fabulous, to be emulated. And this is the image, particularly to us of color, making us think that unless we're engaging in that kind of dysfunctional behavior, there's something wrong with us. There's something wrong with you. You're not being real if you're trying to get an education, if you're trying to move yourself forward. You ain't real if you ain't out there being a thug. If you ain't out there being a gangster, you ain't real. All this bullshit that they're pushing to us, telling us that that's the way you got to act to be a real black man or a real black woman. Well, you saw what I just showed you. You go to England, you go to Northern Ireland, you go to Scotland, you're going to see people living in similar circumstances, caught in the cycle of poverty, and they've got the same kind of dysfunctional behaviors that you see in the so-called black community. It ain't a black thing. It's a human thing. It's a human thing. So please, can we stop this bullshit tearing each other apart? Can we please stop perpetuating this myth? Oh, black men don't treat their women right. Oh, black women they don't know how to treat their men right. Can we stop this bullshit, please? Can we just stop the bullshit? Can we stop the shit? Please stop it. Can we stop putting a label on certain groups of people who are suffering from human problems? Can we please just stop it and get real so that we can find solutions to our problems? So I'm very glad to see that this young man has been caught. Quite honestly, I don't know if he's just so far gone, he's beyond salvation or not, but definitely he needs to be off the streets. He needs to be off the streets, absolutely. And by the same token, we need to start making better choices. Well, in this case, this woman, she didn't ask to get beat up. It's not like she was in a relationship with this man or whatever. But for the angry black female voices out there that are trying to claim that all black men, blah, 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 I got a solution for you. Why don't you take responsibility for your own decisions, your own actions, and the people that you choose to get into relationships with? Now, I'm not saying by any means that whatever maltreatment you got, that you deserved it. But what I am saying is that there are consequences. And sometimes we make bad decisions out of ignorance. We just didn't know any better. And, in cases like that, I say that, it's a tough lesson that had to be learned. But you know what? You got to pick yourself up. You have to forgive yourself for not knowing better in that moment. Learn from the experience and try to do better moving forward. And by all means, get help to heal emotionally and psychologically. And don't feel ashamed to do it because you are human. Who the fuck ever said that you have to be Superwoman? That you have to be dragged through, horrific things and it's supposed to just slide off of you like Teflon? Are you freaking serious? Get real. How could you not be damaged emotionally? How could you not be emotionally scarred when you've experienced horrible situations? How could you not? But the society has a way of punishing us for having the nerve to ask for help, for having the nerve to say, I need help, expecting you to be Superwoman. Nah, bullshit. You're human. And if you have gone through things that were extremely difficult, you need help and you should not be ashamed to seek help, finding ways of resolving those issues inside of you before you end up damaging someone else or damaging yourself. And the same thing goes towards our men. We've been handed a bag of goods for a long time, making us think that there's something wrong with us. Oh, you're not strong, you weak. You are a human being. And if you have experienced negative situations, abusive situations, whether it's coming from other men or coming from women or your parents, whether it was your father or your mother or your auntie or your grandma, whoever it was, you are a human soul. So miss me with this bullshit that you're supposed to stand there like you made out of rocks. The day I can cut you and you don't bleed, then we'll talk. But in the meantime, if you got a pulse and you're made out of flesh and blood and you got a heart beating in your chest and a functioning brain in your head, that means you're human. And when you come in contact with negative circumstances and situations, it's going to have an impact on you. It's going to impact you emotionally and psychologically. And you should not feel ashamed of reaching out for help. Finding ways to get rid of that baggage that you're carrying inside of yourself. And don't, fall into this trap where you go to a psychiatrist and they give you medication, because that's just swapping out one kind of addiction for another. But these are the things that we do because society tells us that as men, we got to be hard. And so, because nobody wants to address the pain that we're carrying inside of ourselves, we seek other ways of dealing with it. We stay medicated 24/7. I know some people that's like, Jesus Christ, man, it's like they never without a joint. What is that all about? Oh, I'm down. Yo, what up? No, no. You're masking the fact that you are in pain. You are in such pain that you cannot spend one day without being medicated. You'll drink yourself stupid, or you'll act out sexually. You don't even know how to have one single partner in your life, constantly chasing one sexual conquest after another, looking for the adrenaline hit that you get from an orgasm. It's all the same shit. And then you end up getting somebody pregnant. Now you bring another life into the world that you are not prepared to handle. And now you got another layer of stress on top of you. And you've passed it on to two other people. It's time that we start admitting when we need help and stop being ashamed of trying to find that help and trying to find solutions and healthy ways of dealing with our trauma. So, once again, can we please stop this bullshit? Can we please stop this nonsense of tearing each other apart? Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We're all human. And as long as we're living in this world, we're going to face challenges. So, can we just acknowledge that fact and work on finding constructive ways of dealing with the challenges that face us in this lifetime experience? Well, that's all I have to share for today. I hope to get some communication, some conversation going on down below in the comment section, but I'm not entertaining any fuckery or foolishness. Just know that. So unless you're going to come with adult dialogue, I want to hear from you. If you're just going to come on this video to troll, I don't want to hear from you. If you have legitimate questions and I know the answer, I'll share what I know with you, or I'll try to point you in the direction, or maybe somebody else can give you an answer. So let's do what we can, all of us. Firstly, those of us who belong to the African diaspora, whether we be in the Spanish speaking world, the French speaking world, the English speaking world, Portuguese, Italian, whatever, let's find ways to heal ourselves and each other. And for the world in general, if you're listening to this, it means you're a human being, and this applies to you as well. Let's try to find ways of helping each other to heal and to deal with the difficulties of life so that we can make this a better world, you know? Don't look for God to do it. Superman ain't coming. Sorry to break the news to you. There is no Santa Claus. There is no tooth fairy. Ain't nobody coming to make this world paradise for you. Sorry. Sorry to break the news to you. It's up to us. If you want paradise, if we want paradise, we have to make it. It's up to us to make this world what we want it to be. So if paradise is what we want, paradise is what we're going to have to make. The responsibility is ours. That's why we've been given this lifetime experience to be able to create, to be able to heal, to be able to grow. So, with that being said, everybody, love, light, peace, prosperity, happiness, health, and perfect peace. Bye bye.